Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Season 2 of Sports Legends of the Carolinas. I'm your host, Scott Fowler, sports columnist for the Charlotte Observer, where I've worked since 1994. And as always in this podcast, I'm traveling across the Carolinas, seeking out some of my favorite sports legends to hear the stories behind their rise to iconic status. If you haven't checked out Season 1 yet, go back and take a listen. We were fortunate to sit down with legends like Steph Curry, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Roy Williams, Jay Billis, and Dawn Staley. For this episode of Sports Legends, we're in Charlotte, inside our podcast studio, and I'm delighted to have Cedric Cornbread Maxwell sitting across from me.
Getting the ball to Maxwell, and Cedric Maxwell, called Cornbread after a movie, puts UMCC out in front.
The best basketball player in UNC Charlotte history. 45 years ago, Cornbread Maxwell was a March Madness mainstay. He led the 49ers to their one and only Final Four appearance in 1977, and then became a first-round NBA draft pick. With the Boston Celtics, he was an essential player on teams that won NBA championships in both 1981 and 1984, and he was the MVP of the 1981 NBA Finals. The Celtics retired his jersey number in 2003.
Level blocked from behind by Maxwell. Maxwell's doing it all. Tipped up that time and in.
Cedric Maxwell just having a great game.
Maxwell is now the radio analyst for the Celtics, but he still lives in Charlotte during the NBA offseason. Cedric Maxwell, next on Sports Legends of the Carolinas. Cedric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, man. It's a great introduction. Thinking about Charlotte and, going back and to be here and to, be at UNCC, to see that school rise to prominence was, it was surreal.
I bet. And you were a member of their inaugural Hall of Fame class, I believe, in the last year or two when that began. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get to those days in 1977, where I know some of your teammates at least have told me that y'all really should have won the national championship, that you got robbed in the semis, right?
Got hosed, man. we really did, but we look back on it and the moments of just getting there. To think that our program was one of the first programs ever to be, initially to be such a small school, to get that far. And to almost win it and beat the number one team in the country that year was pretty fascinating.
It's amazing, really. I mean, and we see how hard that is because it's been 45 years since then, and they have never really come close. It's so difficult to get to a Final Four. You have to have an incredible run.
Especially if you were a smaller school.
Sure. You're not getting the Cedric Maxwells too often. Yeah. Well,
the Cedric Maxwell came here just by chance. Oh. Cedric Maxwell was I guess, playing basketball in Kinston at Kinston High School was pretty fascinating. The fact that I was a junior, like Michael Jordan, went out for the team, and I got cut.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, I got cut from the team. And,
as a junior?
As a junior.
How tall were you?
I was about 6'3.5", and it just didn't feel like I was good enough. And my mom, who used to play basketball at North Carolina Central, she played played college basketball. Thought I was a good player. Asked the coach. He was like, "Well, Miss Maxwell, I don't think so." And then the next year, I think during that year after he cut me from the team, I was in this physical education class. He was a PE teacher. And he watched me play a little bit, and he asked me questions. And he's always watching me when I was playing basketball. And I was like, okay. And then finally, he brought me over. He said, "Can you dunk?" And I'm like, "I never have tried it." And he gave me the ball, and I dunked it. "Can you do it with two hands?" I never tried it, and went and did it. And then he asked me later on, he said, you're coming out for the team, again next year. As a senior. I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Why?" I said, "You just cut me. Why would I come back out for the team?" But lo and behold, during that time, between my junior year and my senior year, I grew like 4 inches. So I came back, I was about 6'7.5" when I came back, and we played, and We ended up playing against Phil Ford, a guy, and we ended up beating them. And it was just kind of fascinating to be in high school back then at that time.
So Kinston High School is what we're talking about, eastern part of the state.
Mm-hmm.
Integrated at that time?
Integrated, played against a guy named, then I was like one of the tallest guys in the eastern part of the state. And I played against a guy named Jeff Crumpton, who ended up going to Carolina and in the East-West All-Star game. And I played so well that I was the most valuable player again in a tournament, because of those moments and they always say about, for most people who are in sports, either you're afraid to make yourself, then you become good because you're afraid to fail. Yeah. And that was one of the stories that was told to me. It's like, I asked Roy Williams about this, and I was introducing myself. He's like, "Oh, I don't need to know. I know you already." When I was under Dean Smith, we had something called the Cornbread Run. I was like, "What's that?" He said, he made sure we were never going to miss out on any other players in the state because we didn't know who you were. Even Sports Illustrated said it about me. I was one of the last great unknown players to come to college because
you fell through the cracks.
Yeah, well, there was no, all the stuff that goes on.
You weren't playing
now.
AAU.
No, there was no AAU.
There was no AAU.
There was no AAU. So you played in your neighborhood and you played in your county and pretty much that was it.
The East-West All-Star game would have been, that's a North Carolina game, you mean that one?
Yeah.
And so that would have been like the summer after your senior year?
Yes.
You already committed at that point to UNC
Yes, played in Greensboro.
Yes,
and
they still have that.
People did not know who I was. And then I played this game and everybody's like, are you committed? Are you committed? And I'd already committed to come to Charlotte, but actually I wanted to go to East Carolina University, which was right in my backyard.
Oh, that would have made sense.
Yeah,
sure.
Right in my backyard.
They didn't want you either?
And no, what they did, they offered me a partial scholarship,
Okay.
which they later on regretted.
I would imagine. Let's back up for a second. Tell me about growing up in Kinston.
All I remember is fun. All I remember is love. I grew up in a segregated town where there were those water fountains, which were white, and areas where you were colored, and doctor's offices you couldn't go in. I just remember being in just a very loving environment. I had my mom and my grandparents, and eventually my dad, and I just remember being just a kid, just being so much love around me. That's all I remember.
You grew up in a African American section of town where you rarely saw white people, or
The only time I saw white people was when I went with my grandmother, and my grandmother cooked for a white family, the Suttons, who were very affluent, and so when she would take me to their house, but I had to dress up like I had my white shirt on and had my black pants on.
Really?
So she was taking her grandson up there, and so that was my first introduction really to to white people, to Caucasians. It was just like whoa, and it was just a different lifestyle. It was a different. You're going across the tracks between the neighborhoods.
It was literally
across the tracks.
And so you found out not too long ago something kind of a blockbuster, I guess, about your own heritage. You took a DNA test. What did that DNA test show, and how did that change your life?
Well, a little perspective on it. The DNA test was about a young woman I went to school with, and she ended up telling me that I had a child that was born that was mine, and that was 40 years ago. And so she called me. I was with some buddies of mine, and we were playing cards actually in Boston. And I was like, what? And so she told me the story. So to make a long story short, ended up taking a DNA test and find out that the young lady in question was not mine, was not my child, and was telling my sister Lisa. And I was like, Lisa, I just want to let you know I took a paternity test. And without missing a beat, my younger sister said, oh, so you can find out who your real father was. huh? What? What'd you say? And then so the rest kind of spilled out, and ended up finding out that I actually was adopted by my dad, later Manny Maxwell, married Bessie Folks at that time. My original name was Cedric Brian Folks. And but you can't find any records of it because those records are sealed in Raleigh. So they closed all that stuff up and and asked my mother about it. So when I found out, I asked her, and my mother's a jolly jokester, and she's like, "Oh, Cedric," and then she told me who he was. His name was DeFord Small, and he lived in South Carolina, and ended up finding out had other extended family. I have a brother, Reggie, who is 6'8" also. I have a brother, Tim, who is about 6'4", and I have a sister, Kay, who I just met 4 years ago. She's about 5'11". So DeFord was about 6'4", and so ended up finding out that Reggie Small, ended up playing in Furman at Furman University. I remember asking my mother about it, and she said, I said, "So when were you going to tell me this story?" And she's a jolly jokester, and she said, "I was going to get around to it." So here she
and
was.
how old is she now?
Here she's 87, and this when she was 84, she was going to get around to
get around to it. All right.
So
she was working up to it.
Yeah, I'm working up. When I get to St. Peter, I'll give you a shout out then.
And at this point, DeFord Small had already passed away. Right?
DeFord Small had not passed away.
Oh,
I had the chance. Well, kind of another story. When my mother told me, I said, "I never met him," and she said, "No, you did." Like, I did? Yeah, you met him about 8 times. 8 times? Yeah. Last time you met him, you were 13, and he came to the house. I said, "But you didn't tell me who he was." How was that going to help me? How was that going to help me? But he passed away. I never had a chance really to talk to him as I knew him as my biological father until later on. But something happened at UNC Charlotte one time, which was kind of jogs my memory a little bit. Remember one of the equipment managers saying, "Your father's here to see you." And I'm like, "Manny is in Kinston right now. I just talked to him." So it could have been, DeFord could have been in the stands at UNC Charlotte watching me play, because he ended up asking my mother. My mother did tell me that one part that he's like, "Well, Bessie, is this your son, our son up here in Charlotte right now, tearing it up?" And it was like, "Yeah." "Well, did you ever think about telling him about me?" And she said, "Well, did you ever give him any money? You ever support him?" He was like, "No." And she said, "Well, that's your damn answer then." That's your damn answer. So I'd never met him. And when I finally found out who he was, after she told me, I tried to contact him. I wrote him a letter. And by then he was ill, and he passed away before I could meet him.
What a blockbuster for your in your 60s to.
Yes.
Although you, as you mentioned off air, you had a really great relationship with your Manny Maxwell, who you consider your father, I'm sure.
Yes.
How tall was he?
Manny was 6 feet tall.
Okay.
So I always thought something was a little unusual with me being 6'8", my brother being about 6 feet tall, and my sister, my mom is tall for a woman. She's 5'11". But
still 6'8". So how did you end up getting to UNC Charlotte, Cedric?
It was just, they offered me a scholarship, and I said I wanted to go to ECU, and there was some more schools around North Carolina that asked me to come, smaller schools. Lenoir-Rhyne was one of them, because Bobby Hodges at that time was, he was from Kinston. He was a coach at Lenoir-Rhyne, and he wanted me to come there desperately. And I went up there, and I always remember having breakfast. They gave me like a couple of pieces of burnt toast and some bacon and and the egg that was cold. And I was like, "I'm not coming here." Not with you. Then I visited UNC Charlotte on a visit, and I went to that cafeteria. Everybody says you're being so, we want to meet you to the dean and this, that, and the other. I love that kind of how people say that. And I go to the cafeteria that first day, and I'm in there eating. Man, the food was great. I was like, man, that was good. Coach was asking me. He said, you want some more? I was like, yeah. He said, it's all you can eat here. What do you mean? What do you
Was that
mean?
the difference?
So that was
all you can eat.
I told people, I said that sold me on it. Other than the beauty of the school, I loved it. But I'm telling you that the cafeteria definitely kind of pulled me over to the side.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back.
King, Maxwell, Watkins, and Kent for UMCC.
And it was your senior year that y'all made the Final Four. But I think you mentioned in a story I was doing a story on Lee Rose's passing, and we spoke on the phone last year. And you told me a story I'd like you to tell here again, if you would, about the time you briefly or almost quit the 49ers team in January of 1976 after a game against Texas Tech, I believe.
Yes, one of the few times I don't think I was successful. And Lee went through a whole diatribe about after we lost the game. We were actually in Texas, and I think it was Lubbock. Yeah, Lubbock, Texas, I think. And they beat us, and we come back to the room, and Lee goes on this whole diatribe about, our guards played well, and our forwards played well, and then he went to say, who's the center at North Carolina? Somebody's like, oh, it was this guy. And who's the center at this guy? And said, you know what? The center at UNC Charlotte didn't play worth a damn tonight. And I was just like stunned.
Was this in the locker room?
No, this was actually at the hotel.
Oh, okay.
Hotel afterwards. And I was mortified. I was mortified. And Lee just went on for about, it seemed like a day that he just kept going on and on and on about how poorly I played. And finally at the end, he said, well, I'm through. Anybody got any questions? Anybody got anything to say? I put my hand up. I said, yeah, okay, what do you have to say? I said, well, you don't like the way I've been playing? I quit. And the room was, it like sucked the air out of the room. All my teammates were like, everybody, all right, Lee, he just aced it. Now, what are you going to do back?
Yeah.
And Lee finally said, I appreciate your offer, and meeting adjourned. And and I walked out of the room. I was teary-eyed and walking down, and the assistant coaches come busting out, oh, you can't leave. My teammates, oh, no. But that was a point of conjecture for Lee and I. And we had a meeting of the minds, and we never talked about it. But because of that, I think that Lee just kind of left me alone then. I had a great time with Lee, and I was, if there's one thing about being invited, being an inductee in the UNCC Hall of Fame was Lee wasn't there. And Lee was inducted also. And that's the first thing I talked about. Wish that he had got his flowers during that particular time while he was alive. And so that was a one kind of down thing for me.
Tell me, because everyone refers to you as Cedric Cornbread Maxwell, how the nickname Cornbread came to be.
That came from a movie called Cornbread, Earl and Me, which was during the 70s. It was Jamal Wilkes, who ended up playing at UCLA, was in this movie. And he played basketball all the time. And he had two little boys who, he befriended. And one of them, his name was Earl, and the other one was Me. Me was actually Larry Fishburne played that role in the movie. And because I looked like Jamal, some guys, this guy named Jerry, a guy who I played with, Jerry Winston, who came from New Jersey at the time, So you look like that guy named Cornbread. I didn't know what he was talking about. I had no idea. And so we went to Madison Square Garden where we played in NIT in 1976. And so one of them, my teammates again teased me as I was playing well in the NIT. I was the most valuable player and was playing well there. And reporters were just, eating up everything I said. And then one of my teammates said, yeah, y'all talking to Cornbread. And the reporter said, ooh, Cornbread, ooh. And so he started writing that down. He dotted. And that's how it started, pretty much from my junior year to record Cornbread.
So it had nothing to do with you actually liking
Cornbread.
cornbread.
Don't like cornbread at all.
You don't like cornbread?
I am not, and I'm a Southern boy at heart, but I don't like cornbread, and I've never had chitlins. So there's certain things that I have not, eaten or I like. I'm just not a cornbread person.
Cedric Cornbread Maxwell does not like cornbread. Now that I did not know.
Yeah.
But I knew a little bit about the movie, and so it became popular in that NIT, right? Where you guys got to the final and lost.
Got to the final game and lost to Kentucky. Okay. And in a losing effort, I was the most valuable player. Even then. And that was our introduction to the big time. That was my introduction to the big time.
All the teams went to Madison Square Garden.
All the teams were in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So we played it. We beat San Francisco, which they had Bill Cartwright. They had these great freshmen that were there. We beat them first, and then we beat Oregon. And then we played North Carolina State. And we had just lost to them. They used to be on our schedule. They'll invite us up just to beat us.
Yeah.
And then I think my last year, my junior year, they beat us by 3 points. And they took us off the schedule. So right after the game, they're like, we will not be playing you anymore. That's it. And then we ended up meeting them in the NIT that year, and we beat them. And then we got to the finals against Kentucky, where we lost a heartbreaker, kind of at the end. And so that was it. But it was, again, our introduction to the big time. It was my introduction saying that all these guys I'm looking at, they're not as good, or I'm better than this guy. I'm better than this guy. Matter of fact, I'm one of the best players right now. It made me think of that way. I'm one of the best players in the country. And all my teammates tease me because of it. Yeah, you think you're big time. But they loved it.
That sounds like a fun team.
Yeah.
You're and so in 77, y'all made the Final Four. You referenced at the beginning, beat number 1 Michigan, an enormous win, maybe the biggest win in school history.
Yeah.
The defensive stars, Staten is already gone. 2 of the first 5 are out of there. And Maxwell, who's putting on quite a show, he is 3 for 3 from the line. This is 1 and 1. And he continues to put on quite a show. 24 points.
Look at him at the line now.
And then you got to the Final Four and played Marquette, a Marquette team that ended up winning the championship. And so tell me about the sort of that game and the last play.
We were down by 2 with about 8 seconds to go. And Lee calls the timeout. We're all sitting on the bench. And he's diagramming the play. I said, Coach, no, just give me the ball and get out, have them to get out the way. And I come down, make a move, and I score. It's 49-49.
That does it. Okay.
And now it's 3 seconds to go. So they try a long inbounds pass. My buddy Kevin King again tells me to get back, because they throw it over. I said, no, I know I'm athletic enough. I know I'm going to catch this ball if they try to throw it over my head. And he throws it, and I catch it, and Jerome Whitehead hits me from behind, jars the ball loose, goes to dunk it. My recovery was, I don't know how I even got there that quick. I recovered so fast that I was able to block his dunk before he dunked the basketball. The ball hung on the rim, was on the rim, and he actually tapped it in while I was on the rim. It was goaltending, and that's how I lost my last college game.
Cornbread Maxwell, he'll take the shot. Cedric Maxwell, timeout with 3 seconds left before the buzzer. It is good. Marquette, Al McGuire.
I do remember that the thing I remember so well about the final, about playing the game against Marquette was after, when they said basket good and my essentially career at that time and it was walking off the floor and Dean Smith, they were going to come out. They played the second game. And he stopped me and he said, "You're a great player." And it was I even hold that to the day. It makes me just think like, wow, that was so cool of him just to say that as I walked off, essentially like in tears.
Yeah, because he's got a game coming and he could have just ignored you. Yeah. Huh. And then you're drafted by the Celtics, number 12 overall. Mm-hmm. And what was your reaction when you were drafted by the Boston Celtics? And we're going to have a Southern fellow was going to have to go to Boston.
Hated it. Absolutely hated it. And I did not want to go to the Celtics because I did not like the Celtics. I was a Philadelphia fan. But I actually wanted to go to Atlanta because I wanted to stay in the South and, play in Atlanta.
Right, that would have made sense.
Yeah, it made plenty of sense for me to, be there. And they end up taking, with their 13th pick, they ended up taking Tree Rollins. Tree Rollins was the 13th pick. He was in my class. Yeah, out of Clemson.
And so the Celtics really weren't good when you first got there, but then they turned it around.
They actually, the year I got there in 77, the year before, they were played in Eastern Conference Finals.
The year before. Being drafted into
and then when I got there, all of a sudden, overnight, they became old.
They still had some star power, but they weren't.
Star power wasn't the word. They had Hall of Famers, but they were just old. Yeah. John Havlicek.
He was still on the.
That was my first year was his last year. Dave Cowens was there. JoJo White was there. Charlie Scott was there. Dave Bing, who ended up being a Hall of Famer. There ended up being on that team, I want to say there were at least 5 Hall of Famers and guys who had been on the All-Star team, 7 guys who had been on the All-Star team. But just overnight, they became old, dysfunctional, and I had to go through those 2 years of just plowing through and having, I think, 5 coaches in 2 years, something like that. I went through a bunch of different things at that time until, we got some kid from Indiana.
French Lick, Indiana. Yeah. So what was it like playing with Larry Bird?
I always tell people what it was like Larry Bird playing with me. I mean, I was averaging when Larry came in, I had a great scoring year. My second year in the league, I was averaging 19 points and 10 rebounds a game. So I didn't start for the first about 5 or 6 games of that year, but just gangbusters, playing, you scoring almost at will, understanding the NBA game. And so when we drafted Larry, they drafted him as a junior eligible. So he went through a whole year and then I ended up watching Larry play against Magic. And I was hoping Magic killed him at that time. I was kind of rooting for Magic. Yeah. And because I was a big cheese. I was a big dog there. Yeah. And we get Larry, and I remember just being this prejudiced black guy who felt like this white guy couldn't play. He had to be the great white hope coming in. And I watched him. First game, first practice, I was like, played against him, I'm scoring, he scores, I score, he scores. Then it was like, he's still scoring on me even more. And I was like, I remember after practice, the first black person I could get to, I said, you know what? That freaking white guy can play right there. and that was the birth and introduced me to, you never judge a book by its cover. And so here I was, this player, and I always say, God's a funny guy. He doesn't give me one of the best white players, but then he gives me Kevin McHale after that. So I get 2 of the best white players ever to play the game in the history of the game playing together. So it was just kind of funny to see that and to develop a relationship with Larry. We formed a great partnership on the court because I was a great scorer on the inside, and he was more of a passer and setting people up. And I learned that at that time, that, I was better suited playing with him than playing against him, or just trying to buck the system to say, hey, I'm the man. Now, Bill Fitch walked up to me, our new head coach, and asked me the first day of practice, you know who's going to guard the toughest guy, right? You seem like a pretty smart guy. I'm like, I'm a lover. I'm not a fighter here. But I ended up having to take the assignment. He said, I am not sacrificing Larry to guard the toughest guy every night. So I learned that I was going to have to be more defensive minded than really offensive minded.
What was your style as a player overall? How would you characterize it?
I was a great scorer in the paint. Not a lot of people could score me. A lot of different moves around the basket. I was long. I was athletic. I was quick. So I could score. And then it became.
What was your go-to?
I had a little jump hook, spin, left hand, right hand around the basket. It reminds me a lot of watching one of my favorite players who was from Charlotte at the time, watching Bobby Jones play. Oh. Bobby Jones was very much like that. Didn't have a lot of stuff from the outside, but had all the movement around the basket. And that's how the game was played during the 80s. It was a inside game, and then you passed it out. So it was a game which fit my style perfectly.
I didn't know Larry Bird smoked cigarettes. I was okay.
And drink beer.
Well, I think I heard that part.
Drink beer and smoke cigarettes, Winston's or whatever they were.
After a game or like when? Like
that was after the game. Well,
off times.
Well, my first year in the league that was a surprise to me. Was my first game in the league. Guy who I idolized was JoJo White, and on my first game in the league, I look across at halftime. And JoJo's smoking a cigarette. I'm like,
at halftime?
What? At halftime in the locker room. I'm like, and I wanted to tell the coach, and I looked up at the board, and Tommy Heinsohn was smoking a cigarette. But Larry was a cigarette smoker and beer drinker. Two-fisted on them beers, man. It was just kind of fun being around him. And Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish. And so formed a great partnership with all these guys.
And despite all those stars, you were the one who was the NBA Finals MVP in 1981.
Played Houston, and I averaged, I think it was like about 19 and 10, something like that, right? And my game 5, I was a deciding game, one of the deciding games. I had 28 and 15 in the game with no 3-pointers.
The 3-pointer, did it even exist?
3-pointers started I want to say 1980. Chris Ford, one of my teammates, made the first one.
Oh, okay.
In the NBA.
But you never shot them, basically.
Basically,
right?
because I think for my career, I made one. When Steph Curry, he makes $1 million, I have one to my credit.
Okay. And in 1984, you won the NBA championship again, had 24 in the pivotal Game 7, and that was the famous final where Magic and Larry played against each other.
Yes, that was the, I want to say that was the birth.
First one.
That was the birth of really the excitement of the NBA and people watching it from coast to coast.
Here comes Maxwell, inside tie game with 21 seconds. The Celtics have tied the Lakers.
Played against my man James Worthy. That even today, that we have these we go back and forth right now. He's an analyst for the Lakers, and me an analyst for, and that hasn't died yet. So to win that game was huge.
What did you tell him beforehand? I've heard different stories as the words used.
Well, I'll use the
real words here.
The real words?
Yeah.
Okay. The real words were, don't you worry about it, because everybody was like standing around, and I was talking to Danny Ainge and my teammates. I said, don't you worry about it. I want you to get on my back tonight. I'm a carrier. And everybody like, you are? I said, yeah. I said, I'm the only Finals MVP in this room. That was before Larry became a Finals MVP. And I had this game of 24-8-8. And
that was a game 7.
in game
right?
7,
Clutch.
game 7 in Boston, and got a lot. And those were the words everybody said. Normally that's what they say, just climb on my back, boys. But those weren't the actual word.
I thought it might be a little more colorful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, if you meet me, it was very colorful. A sailor would have blushed from time to time if listened to me talk.
Was that the pinnacle for you of your basketball career that night?
I think it was obviously had to be a highlight, but to win multiple championships, to be with the Celtics, to have your jersey later on retired by the Boston Celtics, to all my friends, the relationships that I've had over the years. So, but yeah, that would be a highlight. That would definitely be a highlight.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Cedric, let's switch gears for a second. And isn't it true that you were estranged from the Celtics for a while after I believe you played there 8 years, and then at some point something went wrong and you had to apologize to Red Auerbach?
Well, what happened was I had played there for 8 years. My 8th year, we had won the championship in '84. Beat the Lakers. The next year in '85, Red Auerbach wanted to repeat. And I got hurt. No fault of my own. Was something wrong with my knee. And they felt like I could come back and play, and I couldn't. And came back, played just a few minutes during the series. Essentially didn't even play in the last game as we lost to the Lakers. And I got traded. The next year I got traded. And I just signed a very nice contract. And so they felt that for whatever reason, I don't know how they came up with it, I was dogging it. And I even apologized to my teammates later on because I don't think I knew how to be woe is me. I'm not a woe is me person. So when I got hurt, I'm walking around the same way. I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm hurt. What am I going to do? And so I thought that they didn't think that I was hurt, but actually I got traded for Bill Walton. Bill Walton in '85 came to the Celtics. '86, they won it. And I was with the Clippers and played with the Clippers for a couple of years. And then they wanted me to, by the time my career ended, they wanted me to come back to Boston and I said I was never coming back, but they wanted me to come back. They were celebrating at that time. The Boston Garden was closing. So they had players back with their, with a ticket of a game, and they would feature that player and they would introduce that player. And I came back and got a nice ovation, and Jan Volk, who was general manager of the team at that time, said, we'd like for you to come back, and we'd like you to, work for the team and also do radio and PR and all. We'd love for you to do that. And I was like, oh man, it sounds great. Because at that time I was just trying to find my way after I got through playing. Okay. And so Jan turns to me and says, well, in order to get the job, you have to apologize to Red. Apologize to Red Auerbach for what? I was the one who got traded. And then to get the job, I went down to Washington, D.C. I always remember this. Went down to see Red. Red took me in his wife was still living at that time. And Red took me in this little office, and he put his arm around me and said, when you're young, sometimes you don't do smart things. And the next words came out of his mouth, I will always remember it. And he said, I forgive you. Forgive me for what? Oh man, what the hell are you talking about? I was like, but learned at that time, shut your mouth, take the job, and move on. And so I've been broadcasting now for 26 years, but that was me going back essentially to apologize to Red for me getting hurt. And
You apologize. You're apologizing for what? Having an injury?
I was apologizing for having what people would say would be an injury right now, which, guys right now have a high ankle sprain. They might be out for a year, but I had torn cartilage and meniscus and arthritis, everything going on in my knee, but they were so like, look, we want to win, and we know if you play well, then we can win. Physically, I couldn't play because I was just a lot of stuff was going on in my knee.
So it sounds like you almost went down to Washington and kissed the ring, so to speak.
Had to kiss the ring. Had to kiss the ring to get the job.
Yeah.
And
I guess it was worth it, though.
Yeah.
You've been at the Celtics ever since?
Ever since. Been there now. This is my 26 years of broadcaster.
You, as a player, got into a fight with Charles Barkley?
Couple of fights with Charles Barkley. There was there's one is you'll see the Larry Bird, Dr. J, as they get ready to fight, and Dr. J has him around the neck. Well, I was standing there right beside Larry at the time, and Larry and Dr. J kind of squared up, and Charles Barkley grabs Larry from behind, holds his arms down, and Dr. J punches Larry in the face like 3 times with those big hands. Like, oh my God. But I got Charles Barkley around the neck. I'm trying to, MMA, trying to choke him out. And he was so strong, he just flung me, and I went flying all the way to the other side of the court. But that was one time. But then I got traded, and I tell my buddy Norm Nixon, I said, no, Barkley had a habit when he was rolling. He was one of the best in the NBA at that time. He was rolling. And but I told him, I said, if you took a charge on him, he would almost in disdain, like throw the ball at you like you were garbage. So I told my buddy Norm Nixon, who I played with, who ended up with the Clippers, I said, Norm, if he throws and hits me with this ball, I'm about to him up out here. And so Norm like, nah, you ain't nothing, no. So I take a charge. He does exactly what I said. I take a charge. He throws the ball down on me in disrespect. I try to jump up quick, and he pushes me back down, but he pushes me down. So my teammates are holding me. I break away, and now I am just whacking on him. I'm like a whack-a-mole, on him, And the funny thing about it, we played them I get thrown out of this game, and I didn't get fined because Charles was doing that to a lot of people. So the referee, it wasn't Cedric's fault. It wasn't his fault. So
you didn't get fined.
Didn't get fined. Got thrown out, but didn't get fined.
Who, in your opinion, is the best player ever in the NBA?
Hakeem Olajuwon. And Hakeem Olajuwon because he dominated the game better than anybody's ever dominated the game. Wilt was amazing, but Wilt would choose what he wanted to do. One time I want to score, one time I want to, play defense, but Hakeem he dominated offensively and defensively for a 3-4 year span like nobody else did. And Michael was a great defensive player individually, but he didn't dominate the way Hakeem dominated the game. These moves, Hakeem was unbelievable. And I played with him only about a year and a half, and just watched him and marveled. I saw him get a game against Seattle, 46-28-7. One of the few guys in the NBA who's ever had a quadruple double. So
you put him before Michael, LeBron.
Played before all those guys because he dominated the game the way. And I think that only people who say that are people who played with him. You'll hear a bunch of Rocket people say that, and there's no offense at all. I think Michael is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I like I said, I'll ask you a question. My question to you will be this: I'm building a Mount Rushmore right now. And I do this for my podcast all the time. Your Mount Rushmore. Who are you going to put on your Mount Rushmore in sports? This is in the back of your house. Got 4 people. You can pick.
In sports, living or dead?
Hey, I don't care. This is your Mount Rushmore.
My personal Mount Rushmore.
Your personal Mount Rushmore.
Okay. Well, Roger Staubach, because I was a Dallas Cowboys fan when I was little.
Roger the Dodger.
So Roger the Dodger would be on there. That if we're talking personal preference,
this is your,
and also kind of the man he was.
This is your Mount Rushmore.
Okay. This is a question from the Cedric Maxwell podcast. Yeah. Which is an excellent podcast, by the way. You got to check that out. Michael. Okay. I was in college at Chapel Hill at the overlapped him with a year, and so. Not only that connection, but I just think he's extraordinary. Steph, probably. And again, I'm picking guys who I sort of have a little bit of a connection to.
You're Mount Rushmore. I don't care. It's like you're
Mount Rushmore. I'm just explaining. I'm not apologizing. Steph Curry, absolutely. He's a spectacular, but I'm also picking great guys, right? Okay. So Steph, and then let's see, a fourth one. That fourth one could be several people for me. Let me think. I'm going to say, given where we live, Sam Mills. Sam Mills. Yeah. I've covered the Panthers from the very beginning. That's so cool. And if they
what was the thing he said? Put in work. What was it?
Keep pounding.
Keep pounding. Right. Pounding.
The motto's still here, and he was probably, he wasn't the best player that the Panthers ever had. That was Steve Smith, or you could argue Cam Newton, or maybe Luke Kuechly. But Sam Mills was maybe the most important player they had because he kind of began he was their, kind of their life force, I guess. Yeah. And the keep pounding will, that'd be there forever. I mean, that's their motto. Who is the best Boston Celtic ever, would you say?
Russell.
Hard to go wrong with Bill Russell.
Russell has 12 championship rings. He won 8 in a row. He won as a player. He was a player coach. He was the first black coach in the history of the NBA. So Russell by far. Now my Mount Rushmore was, I went with Muhammad Ali, Tiger Woods, one of my favorites, Willie Mays, and then I go off the board. I went with the best female athlete of all time, Serena Williams. Oh, wow! So it always changes.
Shoot, I like your 4, maybe better than mine.
And the funny thing about it, I asked our guy, one of my guys, I had him on my podcast, Bakari Sellers.
Okay.
Who's down in Colombia. You see him a lot on CNN. I asked him this question. He takes my question. He asked Barack Obama, and I don't get credit. I was like, I didn't take it. And
I plagiarized your question.
I saw Bakari this summer when I was down there talking about my book in South Carolina, and he says, I said, man, you didn't even. He said, whenever I see POTUS again, I'm going to have to tell him that was your question. So I was like,
don't hold your breath.
Yeah.
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Well, Cedric, you've been so nice to give us all this time. I just have a couple more things I'd like to ask you as well.
I want to stay, man. This is good stuff. You just keep going.
We're going to keep going then. So this is a little more serious of a question. What would you have told yourself at your age now? You're 67, I believe, right? So what would you have told Cedric Maxwell at, say, around early 20s, 24? What advice would you give that young man right now if you could?
Invest in land. Buy land in Charlotte. Get to hell with Johnny Harris and all them people. Buy land in Charlotte. I would have definitely told him that.
Yeah.
The other thing I would have told, but Cedric Maxwell pretty much has done what he's wanted to do. He's lived a great life. I can't tell him to smell the roses because he always does.
I guess this question gets to also sort of one that I sometimes ask, and that is, what do you regret?
I have none. I've lived an amazing life. I mean, if there's one regret, maybe not meeting the Ford Small. Might be the one regret, but other than that, it's been an amazing life. Manny Maxwell was my hero because he took me. He made me. I told him that when I found out he was on his deathbed, and I never had told him about being adopted and how I was so proud of him being my dad. And I'm the man. I became the man I was because of him. But Manny never let me down. His words, I always remember his words to me. He said, "Cedric, glad I could help."
Really?
Dude, is that what we get out of that? I just poured my heart out to you. Yeah, let me pick those groceries up. Glad I could help.
What did he do for a living, man?
He was a Marine.
Oh.
He was a Marine for 26 years, but regretting telling Cedric Maxwell what to do. He's enjoyed so much. He has great kids, great family, great memories. UNC Charlotte, Boston Celtics. I mean, I don't even know how you, like I said, for me, it's a storybook. It was a kid who was born out of wedlock, became a star basketball player who's lived a fortunate life, great love from his family, great kids, great environment. Professionally to be with the Celtics, to win multiple championships, to be a Finals MVP in the NBA, as I like to tell, as I've told Draymond Green, where I had a kind of argument with him about something. Where I was telling him, I said he would have been knocked out if he'd been playing during the '80s, the way he's done things. And then I was talking to somebody. It was like, let me explain something to you. There's only been 33 Finals MVP, and damn it, I'm one of them.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, and then to have your jersey retired by the greatest professional basketball franchise around, there's not a lot that I can.
That's pretty good for a kid out of Kinston.
Yeah, out of Kinston, born Cedric Folks at the time, then Cedric Maxwell, then Cedric Cornbread Maxwell. So matter of fact, that's one thing I think that I was thinking about possibly doing is hyphenate my name now and putting folks in it someplace.
Folks - Maxwell.
Yeah.
To sort of honor.
Yeah. The honoring that life that I never knew.
Your longevity as a radio analyst is also unusual that you've done that for so long. You had one misstep in 2007, I think, with Violet Palmer, and apologized for that.
Oh, I love telling that story.
Yeah, well, tell us that one.
Oh, the story was a great story. We were in Houston, and my broadcast partner and I, we were talking about Violet Palmer doing so well. And Tommy Heinsohn at that time was Tommy Heinsohn was a television personality. I was the radio side. And I knew Tommy hated any official. So she makes one bad call. In my Tommy Heinsohn voice, I go, go back to the kitchen, make me some bacon and eggs. And I didn't think anything about it because I was imitating Tommy.
It was an imitation of Heinsohn.
It was imitating Tommy. So I did not think anything about it until the next day. I got Jeff, our PR guy says, we're writing an apology for you. Apology for what? What you said about Violet Palmer. I said, what did I say about Violet Palmer? I didn't even, and then he said, oh, you said the thing about bacon and eggs. I said, that was, and then I ended up apologizing to her. The context was something that came out. So for me, I that story to me was, I didn't regret that, but I was more appreciative that it was done, that it happened then instead of now, because the internet.
You're right about that. Last thing, Cedric, just as you think about, I ask people this sometimes, what advice you might offer to others, or what advice you do offer to others in basketball camps or when you speak yourself to live a fulfilling life. What do you say?
Stay true to yourself, your beliefs. Be confident in who you are. be dedicated to your craft. Understand that we all have a very small window to operate in, and try to bring out the best in others. And the biggest thing I always think about is humility, just being humble. That to me is the thing as a basketball player or as a, say, famous person. That has always been, I've always said my biggest strength is the fact that I can make people comfortable around me by laughing at myself. And because when you do that, you disarm people. Like, well, if he can tell a joke about himself, then, I have no problem. So that's what I do when I do my public speaking. We talk on those same terms about who I am and laugh about myself. And that takes it down 10 notches when you get ready to speak. So that would be my advice to anybody. And we live in a great country, which allows us opportunities for people who are like Barack Obama, who was born, out of wedlock and whatever happened to him, become the president of the United States. I think that was the greatest thing that maybe happened to me, was the fact that I can now tell my child, when Barack Obama became president, that probably one of my happiest moments, that he could do anything he wanted, regardless of his color. Whereas I did not feel like that. I didn't think in my lifetime that I would have a black president, except when I saw Samuel Jackson on TV or somebody portraying a black president. Morgan Freeman was always a president, but I never thought. But when Barack Obama became the president, that was one of the. I almost brought a tear to my eye thinking about, people of color and what they went through and where he is to be the most powerful man in the world, and he was a person of color.
That's a great story. A good place to end. That's Cedric Cornbread Maxwell. We just appreciate you being with us so much today, Cedric. I'm Scott Fowler, and this is Sports Legends of the Carolinas. Thank you again, Cedric. Thanks so much for listening to Sports Legends of the Carolinas, a production of the Charlotte Observer. This show is produced by Lume Ali Sally, Jeff Seiner, and Cotta Stevens. The sports editor of the Charlotte Observer is Lydia Craver, and the executive editor is Raina Cash. Davin Coburn is McClatchy's director of audio. For lots more sports content and to continue supporting this kind of work, please visit charlotteobserver.com and consider a digital subscription. And connect with me on Twitter at Scott_Fowler or email at sfowler@charlotteobserver.com. See you next time.